I'm Julia Melville, and I'm running a series of podcasts looking at some of the different options that can support us to get beyond the thinking mind, to help relieve and release stress, anxiety, and fear. I am intrigued and fascinated by the language of energy, how energy impacts our minds and our bodies, the relationship we have with that energy, where we hold energy, how we use our energy, and how we can shift our energy. With my own journey, I am continually exploring how to shift and release from the stories I was repeatedly telling myself from a young age. I am a BACP accredited psychotherapist and counsellor, and I worked for many years at a mental health charity before setting up my own private practice. 5 years ago, I completed my Kundalini Yoga Level 1 teacher training, and this practice continues to support me every day of my life. I love teaching and showing people a different way of being beyond speaking. I am also a theta healing practitioner and instructor. It's these 3 trainings that are intertwined through my work now as a mentor, supporting people to release unhelpful repetitive patterns of behaviour. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but it was recently whilst thinking about my own shifts that I decided to create a series of podcasts looking at different options, talking to inspirational people also working with well-being and healing in a variety of modalities. I really hope you enjoy the podcasts as much as I have enjoyed creating them. And in the words of John O'Donoghue, awaken to the mystery of being here and enter the quiet immensity of your own presence. So welcome everybody. This series of podcasts is looking at different ways of supporting self that are beyond talking. We will be talking about the impact of not being present. We will also be talking about other ways to physically and mentally shift anxiety and fear, which right now feels very topical. And today I am delighted to announce that someone who I came across a few years ago is joining me to talk about different ways of supporting self. I've attended Catherine's classes both in person and via Zoom, and I'm always amazed by the power of the music, the guidance from Catherine, and the sense of calm and peace at the end. Catherine Wright is a movement medicine teacher and a One Spirit minister who works with ceremony and dance to bring healing to hurt places, with a special interest in both addiction and conflict resolution. So Catherine, I would like to hand over to you now to tell us how you came to train in this magical movement medicine and what your journey has been.
Oh, thank you, Julia. It's such a pleasure to get an opportunity to talk about movement medicine. I mean, I'm aware that we're talking about working without words, and that is at the heart of movement medicine. And often the music is the main guidance, and so I will have ideas about why I'm doing something in a class or in a ceremony. And then I just have to kind of hope that it works. So it's lovely to get an opportunity to kind of talk about what's going on in the background, as it were, for me. And I came into conscious dance as a practice almost. It was one of those things where a friend was talking about it. And at first, for me, dance felt like quite an alien practice to do in order to understand myself better. Because I didn't feel particularly comfortable on a dance floor. And, all those thoughts about people looking at me, or maybe that I wasn't very good at it. And although everybody always says, including me, it's not about being good at dance, nonetheless, as a newcomer to it, it looked to me as if some people were very good at dancing and had, the perfect body, the perfect clothes, whatever. And however, the thing that drew me to it was hearing about some of the exercises that were used in order to explore all sorts of issues that we all struggle with. So, for example, my friend had been talking about an exercise that they had done on the dance floor about saying yes and saying no, drawing boundaries. And she was just talking about how in moving with it and in dancing, you begin to get a sense of why it's difficult to draw a boundary. Because sometimes it feels like, why is it so hard for me to draw a boundary where I need to draw a boundary? I know what I want and what I don't want, and yet I end up going along with things or going to things or continuing to stay at things when they're not right for me. And when you're working with dance, doing it, she was talking about how it becomes really easy to do it. You just turn your back and lo and behold, the person is now no longer even anywhere near you, never mind dancing at you. And she said she realized that all the feelings that lie behind not being able to say no are the things that stop us. Like the worrying if the person won't like you, or the worrying that maybe you'll look as if you're this, that, and the other.
Absolutely, and judgment and all those things.
Yeah. And somehow it was hearing that in the movement, something became clear to her that she was never able to get to in speaking about it. And that it attracted me because I felt that at that point in my life, I'd been doing a lot of work on trying to understand why I am the way I am, which, of course, as is the case for many people, is sometimes very difficult. And I felt as if I had hit some brick walls, that I was kind of stuck, just sort of going round and round in circles. And yeah, so that's how I came to dance, conscious dance, for the first time. And had anybody told me at that time that I would end up teaching this practice, I would have found that quite an amusing thought, because it seemed like a million miles away.
Yes, I know.
And I would say for the first 10 years at least of taking the practice deeper, I was only dancing in order to support myself. And I find it a very powerful practice. It's not that I don't think that talking about things is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It's more that for me, dancing is one of the ways in which you can be with something but not thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
And of course, sometimes walking in the woods also has this effect. You know, you're stuck with something and you think, oh, can't bother working on this anymore, and go out for a walk. And you come back and magically, you can now work on it. It's somehow sorted itself. And dance works for me in quite similar ways to that, where it's something where my whole self is engaged, not just my mind. And my mind can sometimes feel as if it's not really like what I'm giving my mind things to do, like be inside my body and notice what I'm doing with my elbows, or, just noticing what a relief it is to feel that movement in my spine. That's what you're doing with your mind during the dance, is somehow being more fully in your body.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, wisdom, which comes from somewhere beyond ourselves, I think, gets a chance to move in. And yeah.
So I have a question that I want to ask, that I wonder, because I know you were previously an academic, And I wonder what the transition was like for you to come away from what you described to me as living mostly in your head, to embodying all that's around you.
Yeah, I mean, I think at first it was quite challenging for me. I mean, I was, when I say I was an academic, I was completing my PhD and I was doing some teaching, and I wouldn't say that I was the greatest at it, but it was something that it was a milieu in which I felt very familiar. And I was always, although I wasn't a particularly good student, I was always quite a confident student. You know, I would I'd like to have my say, and I am quite opinionated, and I would get all animated in philosophical discussions and like to keep my end up. And then when I started moving into this other world where people were wanting to follow process rather than content of what people were saying, I suddenly felt as if I was on a much more unknown ground, but also ground where I might unwittingly let people know things about me that I hadn't intended them to know. I'm really aware that when you're living in your head, you feel at least as if you have quite a lot of control about what's going to come out of your mouth next. Whereas when you start moving into this more physical, less verbal way of understanding yourself and understanding the world, there is a real unknownness about that. And actually, the first chink in the academic armour, as it were, was working with a Gestalt therapist. And it at first felt really unsafe. I would be blah, blah, blah about whatever it was. And she would say, I noticed that your right hand is moving more than your left hand. And so tell me what your right hand is saying. Now tell me what your left hand is saying. And I would have this feeling of having been somehow spied upon, because I hadn't been meaning to do anything with my hands. Thank you very much. I was in control of what I was talking about, and this idea that, and it was funny years later when I was working one-to-one with somebody, and he had his hand in his pocket, and he was talking away with his right hand. And I said, and I was aware that I was echoing my own Gestalt trainer from years before. I said, and what would your left hand say about this? And he then had that look on his face of, oh my God, how did she know that? And then he said, well, what my left hand would say is, and then said something, because it was a workplace thing, and he was talking about giving in the workplace, and then what the left hand had to say was that he was thinking of resigning because his work was actually impeding his family life too much. And it was the breakthrough in that relationship, because suddenly he was willing to talk about his whole self in the workplace, not just the bit that was willing to come to work. And I guess it felt like a trick, because of course I had no idea what his left hand was going to say, but it felt, and I knew how it felt because it had felt like that to me too, as if somehow the person watching your body knows something about you. And I now think that that's not the way this works at all. It's not that you reveal all sorts of things in your body language. It is by taking your attention to the places that are stuck or tight or not moving, and giving those parts permission to move.
The language of the body.
The language of the body enables you to realize things about yourself that you were hiding from yourself. It's a route into the unconscious.
And I really love when you said that, you know, sometimes you forget to dance.
Yeah.
If you want to say a bit about that, because I
Yeah, you know, that old habits die hard, that um, uh, even after however long it is, so more than 20 years, where if asked, I would say that dance is my main practice, I still think that my tendency is to live in my head. So, you know, if something, I was on a course a couple of weeks ago and I felt I didn't. This is true. I was mixing with people from a very different world, a very different part of the forest, as it were, and I felt kind of uncomfortable and was, you know, doing all sorts of things like feeling they didn't like me or whatever, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was aware that at the time I was trying to understand what was going on and trying to understand how to find my place in this group, and it wasn't until embarrassingly a while later that I realized that I was hardly breathing. And then thought, okay, so what if you were then to just bring some air in and air out, and notice that your chest can expand and your belly rise. And somehow that was the breakthrough of helping me be more present by not just the physical moving of my body, but also then thinking about the qualities of the element of air. You know, that lightness, that bridge to the skies, that, you know, can blow things away, it can warm, it can make a fire rise. There's all sorts of things that air can do. And then just thinking about those qualities and bringing those into the situation, and then feeling massively relaxed and much less concerned with why I was so uncomfortable and what they thought of me and whether or not I could ever fit in, and more, whether I could, you know, I paid a lot of money to be on this course, whether I was going to get my money's worth. All those thoughts stopped being so important. But the tendency that I have, certainly, is to try and work it out. What's going on here? How can I make it better? Is this good enough? Do I have to leave? What do I need to do? And all of that can be, my image of it is it's like a hamster wheel. You just go round and round and round because you don't know the answer, actually, because probably there isn't an answer. But whereas when you breathe and you then start bringing in the qualities of air, then somehow, whether or not you get your money's worth and people think you're all right or they think she was a bit weird, it somehow isn't so important. Of course it's not important. It was 2 weeks ago. I'll probably never see any of these people ever again. And I did get something out of the course.
Good. But you describe it so beautifully, because I love the way you use the words and the language that you use to come into your body. And of course the breath is so powerful. You know, as a Kundalini yoga teacher, breath is the main thing.
Yeah.
But it's so, you describe it so eloquently and beautifully that, you know, to be in this sort of dizziness of the head, but then to come into that beautiful calm expansion of the body is just fabulous. And how powerful to have that shift.
Absolutely. And my own experience of that particular thing with one tool or another tool is, I you know, I have at least 100 stories of being stuck in some way in my head, and then finding a way through. And these are practices, whereas movement medicine is a practice that, of course, I learned on a dance floor. These are practices that you can use when you're talking even one-to-one with somebody, I mean, even talking about it with you now, I'm not sure if you did too, but somehow even just talking, you suddenly remember your breath.
Yeah.
And already, even with 1 second of it, it becomes a resource. And yeah.
So if you were to describe to the listeners about the dancing, what would you, and somebody had never danced before, what would you be wanting them to know about it? Or
yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because, of course, people come to a dance floor by many different routes. And sometimes people come because they love dancing and they haven't done it since they were a teenager and used to get drunk and dance. And then other people, as you say, they feel as if dancing is just not something that they do. And I guess that was my experience of it. Not that I didn't dance as a teenager, but I had never thought of dance as being something that I did. And that dance is a very beautiful thing to watch as a performance.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make me think that I could get up and do that, which is just as well, because I couldn't, mostly. And so I think that's the first thing I would want somebody to know, is that this is a different thing from dancing as a performance. This is, when it's dance as a practice, the emphasis really and truly is not on how it looks to somebody else. It's how it feels on the inside. And I'm not always altogether successful in this selling of it to people who don't dance. I say this because my own beloved husband, who definitely knows how much this means to me and really values my work at some level or another, wouldn't be seen dead on a dance floor because he's too self-conscious about not being able to dance. And it doesn't matter how often I say, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It matters to him what it looks like. So I'm really aware of that. But I do think it's important to start there, of knowing that it is a practice which comes from the inside. The other thing is that there are no rights and wrongs with it. Like sometimes, if the music is really high energy, the easiest thing in the world is to dance high energy. But that doesn't mean that's what you have to do. It's I often have this sense of just let this track, this music talk to your body. And now just let your body talk back. And it's like, what your body might want to do is really slow, and it might want to get up and sort of answer back in a big way. But it's somehow, I remember a dance teacher of mine saying to me at one point, if you get stuck, imagine you are the speaker and the music is coming through your body. And I remember just feeling quite excited by that as a thought. And so I think that would be the starting point, would be that this is an exploration, and it really is a very free dance practice. And that's not to say that there are never instructions, but there are never instructions that you have to follow.
No, I agree, but it's lovely guidance from you, and I certainly, for me, it brings me into my body, as you say. It's if it's a high energy beat, and I love dancing to high energy music, but if it's a high energy beat, I don't necessarily have to dance like that. It's about really listening to my body and actually what does it want to do, and I really benefit from that.
And yet, certainly for me, certainly at the beginning, but I would say even now, I find guidance really helpful, particularly if my mind is very busy.
Yeah.
I remember once coming into a dance floor, and there was the warm up, and it was quite a long warm up, and my mind was all over the place, and I was feeling that I couldn't settle. And then the teacher, it was Sariana actually, she started talking about elbows, and it was just such a relief for me to just take my attention to my elbow. Because however busy my mind is, I don't forget what my elbow is. Whereas if somebody gives, like, just do whatever you want to do, I can get really feel lost in my thoughts. Whereas if someone gives a very definite instruction, move your left elbow, I can move my left elbow with the best of them. And so it can be a resource again. It's that thing of giving my busy mind something to do.
Yeah,
exactly. It is physical. It helps me give all of myself back to the dancer. That's a sort of movement medicine expression, talking about, we are many things, and one of them is a dancer. And how do you give yourself to the dancer? You take as much of yourself inside your body as you possibly can, and trust that if the dancer has a body to play with, it will do something fun and interesting.
And also it's fun.
Yes, that I think I'm really aware that sometimes when I'm talking about it, I can get very solemn, and it can sound as if it's a really heavy duty therapeutic practice. And I think that's probably because I am quite, I wouldn't say I'm a depressive person, but I'm a very, I have a lot of feelings person. And so I get very upset, and I get very scared, and I get very angry. And so the dance for me, it has to hold an awful lot of that stuff. Whereas it also is just a lot of fun. And I am aware that some teachers have more access to that than I have. And sometimes I'm funny by mistake, which is always a good thing. I remember once I was working with these people, and they were in conflict, and they were really they were doing their best, but they were feeling as if they'd made a lot of progress, and they had. And then at a certain point I said, I noticed that so far you haven't actually managed to look at one another. And I said, I wonder if you could just look at one another. And they were kind of not, they were obviously thinking about doing it because nobody was talking, and they were building up to it. And then I said, so if you could just look at the other person and just say, either in yourself or out loud, this is me, Catherine, looking at you, Julia. And they both simultaneously burst out laughing. And they just looked at me as if I was a complete bampot. And that was the moment that broke all the tension, and I suddenly realized they were together in thinking that I was a complete flaky idiot. And so I had unexpectedly, by going too far, had done something really hilarious. And somehow the holy fool has come out to play and had made everything all better in a way that I, in my serious, solemn way, had been not quite able to do. So I'm really aware, and it's actually one of the archetypes in movement medicine is the dancing fool. And sometimes that whole thing of just having fun, just having fun with being angry, just having fun with being sad, or making a fool of yourself, can actually release you. Even just having fun, just for having fun. You've had a busy week at work, and then you get onto a dance floor. In the good old days, we got onto a dance floor. And then you just have fun. And at the end of the evening, you just feel, oh, wow, there's more to life than hard work.
Definitely. You feel so good. I feel like that after I've done your classes. It's just wonderful.
Right.
I just, I get, and I can't join as often as I would like to, just for other commitments, but I get this sort of calling in my body that it's time to dance. I need to go and dance and get into that space, and it's really lovely. Yeah. And I know you said that after dancing, it takes you to a kinder place, and that you're kinder to yourself, to others, and you can feel more held.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
It just, it, because I do think that, I honestly do think that humans are basically well-intentioned. And,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and when we spend enough time hanging out with ourselves as dancers, then we somehow tune into that frequency, which is in all of us, and almost always land in a place of just well-being and feeling as if, yeah, we all make messes and we all screw up and we all take on too much or refuse responsibilities, whatever, all this great long list of things that we all do wrong. But basically, I think we really mean well. And when we are in that frequency, we can be very forgiving of all our own mistakes, but also of other people's mistakes, and can really have that sense of knowing that it looks different from over there. And that's why, I mean, we can all do this, very disapproving of politicians that we disagree with. But almost for me, when I'm in that place of dancing, I don't know, it just softens me so that I feel more compassion for the pickle that people get into. And it makes me long to bring more love into the world, so that somehow, if each of us just did a little bit of that, then the ripple effect of that would be enormous.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you so much for joining me today, because I certainly am thinking, right, when can I sign up for the next class? So, so how can people find you? What's the best way for people to can you give out your website? And
Yes, I have a website which is called catherinewright.co.uk. I also have a Facebook page, and actually now, thanks to the wonderful Erin Karn, you can sign up for my classes through the website, and it's really easy. Click, kadoom, and it happens. And yeah, and on my website there are, email addresses and such like. I do one-to-one work, I do dance workshops in the good old days, and presumably in the future too. But I'm also cooking up a few online offerings. This year my ongoing group went online. So all of that will also be on my website.
Lovely. It sounds wonderful. I know I am certainly, when we come out of these current restrictions, I really am looking forward to you holding a workshop, because I would really, really love to come, or a retreat, or whatever you do.
Yeah. Wonderful. I can't thank you enough, Julia. It's gorgeous just to get the opportunity to share with you in this way.
I would like to thank Catherine so much for joining me on this podcast, and I really hope that you have enjoyed listening to us and just hearing all about the wonderful movement medicine that she does, and how she really helps us come into our bodies and learn how to express ourselves and express that freedom within. And I would encourage you to ask yourself, and to reflect and just on how you are, what your hopes are. Notice how you're feeling. Can you dance into that feeling? And it doesn't have to be an organised class. It could be that you put some music on and you dance your way into that feeling. And also reaching out to friends and family, what your hopes are and what your dreams are, and how you can bring those to fruition. Thank you again for listening, and I'm so looking forward to sharing the next podcast with you.